born and raised in Seattle, and it's such a pretty, diverse landscape. In my mind, Blacks made Seattle, and we put it on the map. We had businesses, we had homes, we had churches, such a rich history and cultural roots. Life in Seattle has been beautiful, has been a combination of bitter and sweet. August 20th, 2015, I will never forget the date. A very tragic accident happened. My sons had a 30-foot fall from a window. And I remember just screaming at the top of my lungs and just praying. They were rushed to the hospital. We didn't know if they would live, breathe on their own again. For me, I knew something miraculous was going to happen. When this accident happened, it took something tragic, something major to actually shift what was valuable to me. I looked over at my kids and I remember saying, I just wish I could have someone who can keep an eye on you while I work. So I started writing this business plan, and that's where you got work and play lounge. Being an entrepreneur is always going to come with a set of challenges. Those challenges were compounded by racism, by being a woman. Less than 1% of commercial real estate in our country is occupied by Black business owners. The biggest hurdle was securing funding. On paper, they would allow me to apply and then go through the formal process, only when I show up to change the narrative suddenly and to say, we just really don't understand your business idea. So after dealing with the hurdles and realizing that I was not going to be able to get traditional funding, I took an untraditional approach. I took out my pensions, I took out credit cards, and took all my savings. I can't wait on someone else to help fund me. I remember a friend saying, Margie, apply for this grant. And I had never applied to a grant. And I remember getting an email. It said, congratulations, you won the Comcast Rise Award. And I literally screamed. Overnight, $10,000 was deposited into my business bank account, right at a critical time, literally being the stopgap of closing my doors. COVID shut down everything. And people in my industry just did not survive. And so it helped validate my vision because it was so many years of, was I doing the right thing? And it just gave me the confidence I needed to move to the next level. Huge shout out to Comcast for changing the trajectory of my business and being the first institution to ever invest in me.
My name is Alicia Crank. I am the executive director here for Seattle CityClub and your guest moderator for the evening. Our underlying theme for this month's Civic Cocktail is Black History Month, so we're going to dive into a couple of fun conversations. One will be with a couple of our Black statewide electeds that are based out of Snohomish County, and then we're going to follow that conversation with Black immigrants and refugees here in the greater Seattle area. So we're going to have a great conversation tonight. It's going to be engaging, and I'm so happy that you are all here. This moderated discussion has questions that we cultivated ahead of time, but you in the audience, in person and at home, will also have an opportunity to pose questions to our panelists. So if you're online, we have a staffer that is online with you in the chat. So just make sure to put your questions in the chat and we'll make sure that we get them and ask them if time permits. If not, we will always make sure that they get a hold of those questions, even if we run out of time. And also for those of you who are here in person, we do have a space in the middle of the room where you'll be able to ask your questions. And I will give you a heads up as to when you can start forming a line if you do have a question. I would like to give a special thank you to our sponsor, Comcast, who I think is also in the room tonight. Thank you so much. Our cocktail partner this year, last year, and I'm sure for future years. And thank you to Bermudez Media, who is taking care of our live stream and AV tonight. Thank you so much. So with that, I'd like to do something a little different because every time, no, don't be scared. You know, we talk about introductions, and every time I try to introduce somebody or someone tries to introduce me, I'm like, you didn't mention this thing. So I like the people to self-introduce. So tonight, our first set of guests are Representative April Berg and Senator John Lovick, who both represent the 44th Legislative District. And I would like each of you to take a moment to introduce yourselves to our audience. So we'll start with the Senator. Look at that.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. You all heard him say that I'm in the number one position. Just so we got that. So, I'm so excited to be here with Alicia. Thank you so much. I am State Representative April Berg from the 44th Legislative District. I always like to start my introductions with a little bit about myself and how I got here, because that's always top of mind when you look at a Black woman with a nose ring and dreadlocks who represents a district that's about 3% Black. You go, how did that happen? And so
she just stole my first question, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, we can wait for that. But just to give you just a highlight, I came originally from Chicago. I've been in the community for about 25 years now with myself, my husband, my 6 amazing kids. I've got 2 UW grads, 2 Western grads, one who just started at UW, and one who's a junior at Jackson High School in Mill Creek in the 44th. So it is, I'm so excited to be here. I'm also here today as the chair of House Finance. I am the first Black woman who's the chair of a fiscal committee in the House, and I am so excited to be chairing that committee with all the revenue options and opportunities that we have to change our regressive tax code. So that's why I'm here. That's who I am, and thank you for inviting me.
I love to say I would go without introduction, but I'm going to tell you that and I'm just kidding, of course. My name is John Lovick, and I'm a state senator from the 44th District. I started my public service life 52 years ago in the United States Coast Guard. I went to boot camp in Alameda, California, and they literally had to handcuff me to bring me to Washington State. And once I got here, I saw how beautiful this state was, and I remember calling my mother from the ship. And I said, my dear, I'm going to stay here forever. 52 years later, I'm still here. I left the Coast Guard after 4 years, and I joined the Washington State Patrol. I patrolled right out here. I spent 31 years with the State Patrol. In the meantime, I got elected to the Mill Creek City Council. I eventually got elected to the legislature, and I was the elected sheriff. I always tell people I was one of the very, very few Black elected sheriffs, the only Black elected sheriffs in the Pacific Northwest. But I love public service, and it is just something that I absolutely love doing. I've been in the Senate now a little over a year. I've spent a total of 16 years in the state legislature, so that's who I am. I'm really happy to be here, so thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for being here. And you have to know that they literally made a dash down here straight from Olympia to be here tonight. You might have skipped out on something. So thank you for being here with us tonight. So you both mentioned again that you're in the 44th LD up in Snohomish County. How do you work with your neighboring county state representatives on issues that impact all of us in Seattle, Puget Sound, beyond?
You know, we work well together. I always tell people that you might not agree on everything, and what I try and tell other elected officials, particularly people from the other party, I say that we are at times political opponents, but we're not enemies. You know, we're never enemies. I used to hear one president always refer to the media, and he referred to people as being enemies. We're not enemies. At the end of the day, we want the same thing for our communities. And I always tell Rep. Berg, what I want in my communities, I want good, safe schools, good, safe roads, and jobs with benefits. Who can be against that? So that's how we work with our neighboring districts, and we work very, very well together.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think the biggest thing, and I think the senator really eloquently stated it, it's about shared prosperity. And when we get to Olympia, we come to Olympia from all of our different spaces, all of our different districts, and we've had some, really hard fights, some real hard conversations in newspapers, at debates, but we get to Olympia with this view of a shared prosperity. What is going to make our state look better, work better, feel better? And it's amazing how sometimes you don't know who's on what side of the aisle, either D or an R or, independent. You just know that person was elected. You think about that. They were elected. So we have over 100,000 people in our district. Not all 100,000 voted. I wish they would. But we have all of my colleagues got there because people elected them and said, we want you to represent us. When they walk through the doors at the Capitol, I have to respect that. I have to respect that. And they look at me and they respect it. We might disagree on things, but we all know that we were there for a reason.
And I'm glad that you both mentioned or leaned in on, the differences piece, right? Because when we talk about Civic Cocktail and when we try to bring up topics here, we want to have that dialogue across differences. And I think there's a couple of questions I want to ask. So one is around the fact that, again, you're in Snohomish County. I live up in Snohomish County too. And I believe this district is the only one where all three of the state reps are African American in a county that's very, very white. What does that mean to you? What is the significance of that? What are you hearing from people? Or is there even a stereotype around, oh, they must be from Seattle if it's that group? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I can jump in. We're here. So myself, my seatmate, who's also in the House with me, and the senator, we're all from the same district. We're all African American. That's only happened one other time in our state's history. I think it was around 1972, and it was in Seattle, where we had an all-Black delegation. And the reason why we're representing our district is because we're in our district. I come to this work from school boards. I was a PTA mom. I lived my life, raised my kids, and got in a position where I could represent my community. And it didn't matter that I was Black. It wasn't because I was Black. It wasn't because I wasn't Black. It was, you're the best one to represent us. Same thing happened with the senator, and the same thing happened with our seatmate, Rep. Donaghy. We were the best ones to represent the community, and I love that the conversation has progressed to that point, because I think at no point should a mom sit in a PTA meeting for like 3 hours and think, this is it. This is the only place my voice has mattered. And then get to school board. Well, that's it. That's really the limit, because you don't really look like us. That's ridiculous. But we were able to represent folks in our district because we're from our district, we're doing the work, and we're listening to people.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I like to share a story when I'm asked a question like that about FDR. And I'm a huge fan of history. And FDR died on April 12th of 1945. And I'll say this real quick. When he died, they were bringing his body back from Warm Springs, Georgia. And as they were passing through small towns, people lined the railroad tracks to bid farewell to a beloved president. And as I understand the story, they were going through one town, and one elderly gentleman dropped to his knees with tears rolling down his face. Another man helped him to his feet, and he said, "Sir, you're crying. Did you know the president?" The elderly man wiped away the tears and he said, "I did not know the president, but the president knew me." That's what we try to do in our community. Everywhere we go, they might not know us, but we try our absolute best to let them know, to make them feel like we know them. And that's the way we do it. We do it everywhere we go. I'm in the LA Fitness all the time working out. I'm out walking. And I know I shouldn't say that, but I'm out walking. I'm in the store. I go to Costco. I'm there to shop, yes, but I'm also there to talk to people. I'm never going to walk past a person and not talk to them. People need to know that we know them, and that's what we have done so very, very well. We've been out at places together, and people will stop, and we'll stop. Sometimes we'll ignore each other to talk to them. People have to believe, I don't care what you're running for, if you're in public service, they better think you know them, or you better treat them like you know them, and that's what we've done in the 44th, and we made that pledge.
Thank you for that. And Senator, I want to stay with you for a second. You already touched a bit on your public safety experience and being the first Black elected sheriff. How has your work and life experience in public safety influenced your work as a legislator?
That's a great question. So you do have some life experiences that I do have some life experiences that most people don't have. And I'm going to say this very, very clearly, and it's not going to please everyone. Sometimes I carry a little bit of shame, and I mean this sincerely. I carry a little bit of shame in my heart from the times that when I first started as a state trooper. It was a very, very lonely world. There were 700 plus state troopers in the state patrol. I remember there were 7 of us, and it was a very, very lonely world. I tell people that many times I absolutely loved going to work every day. I loved getting in my patrol car and driving up and down I-5 and doing what you do. but I hated being at work. And it's hard to kind of reconcile that. I loved getting in my car going to work, but sometimes I hated being at work because there were times that we weren't treated well. So what the influence that it has on me is that I always say to myself, everybody matters. And that's my approach to life. As a legislator, as a father, I want to treat everybody that I see like they absolutely matter in this world. And that's why we have been very successful, and we are very successful as legislators in the legislature, because everybody matters to us. You know, you talk about coming down here. We planned this a long time ago. I told Rep. Berg, I said, we're just going to hop in the car and leave the committee hearings and whatever we're doing and drive down
And we
here.
did.
And we didn't
Don't
have
tell.
the speed to get here. I drove. So it's all about how you just treat everyone like they matter. And that is what I've learned from just my experience in this world.
Thank you for that. This question is for the both of you, but I'll start with Representative Berg. You know, when this came together, when we were putting together this program, and, you know, some people looked at who was going to be here, and they were like, you have two black, you know, folks from Snohomish County that are electeds that are Democrat. What is the differences here? They're going to agree on the same thing. And I'm like, no, they're not. But so that being said, what are some topics within the legislature that you feel like you are not necessarily on the same page on, but try to work together across those differences that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. You know, as a party and also as a people, we're not a monolith. And so I constantly say that to people. I do have to just, before I jump into the answer, our Legislative Black Caucus is 11 members strong, 9 in the House and 2 in the Senate. It is amazing to serve with so many colleagues that look like me, but we're not a monolith. And that goes for me and the senator as well. And so I think, you know, we might, in some areas, law enforcement, listening to your experience in law enforcement, your lived experience, very different than mine. I'm a mom who's been on 2 school boards. I call myself a recovering school board director. There is life after school boards, just for those of you who are wondering. But, you know, I look at things like policing in our school maybe a little bit differently than the senator, because I come from a different lived experience. You know, sitting on boards, thinking about not only the cost, but the over surveillance and the over policing of our Black and brown children. But you're bringing that law enforcement tinge to it. So there are definitely areas where you're going to see us kind of veer in terms of what's decisions that we make for our community.
You know, I would think probably an area that I don't have the total disagreement with maybe my colleagues and maybe my caucuses. I am a big fan of school resource officers. And I know there are times that there are people that feel that it's over-policing having those school resource officers. I believe that those school resource officers are there for a number of reasons. One being to build partnerships and to build relationships. And I'm not saying that we disagree on that, but I know I have colleagues, when I was in the House, I had some of my colleagues were totally in disagreement with my approach to that. I would not mind seeing school resource officers in all of the schools. And I know a lot of people don't agree with that. But it's something that I'm a huge fan of. And so maybe that's an area. But other than that, you know, one of the things that we're able to do is we're able to talk through a lot of things. And maybe we don't agree, but we don't publicly come out. And I won't publicly come out and call her out, I can guarantee you that. And I know she won't to me. Because at the end of the day, things that I move, things that I pass in the Senate has to go over to the House and get worked on too. And you don't want to tick people off in that arena. So you want to have friends on both sides.
Can I mention something else? And I just have to say this, Senator. You know, my son ruptured his Achilles playing pickleball. And so the good senator passed a pickleball bill as our state sport. And so I'm just saying the House of Berg might be coming for you. So there's another disagreement. There
we have a question about that coming up. But I hate to come off of this light meet, but I feel like, especially bringing up school resource officers, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Memphis. How have you seen or heard those conversations within your respective House and Senate impact what's happening up in your houses right now?
So, you know, I just want you to know that I'm a father and I'm a very emotional person when it comes to things like that. And I cannot get I could not get what I saw happen to George Floyd out of my head. I still, and I'm not saying this just to be dramatic, I still have nightmares watching what his eyes looked like. And every time I see a video or something like that, I say, this is the worst we're going to see. And then it gets worse. So what the conversation is with us, and I'm having these conversations, are that we have to, first of all, respect the great work that the men and women in law enforcement are doing. But we are going to have to bring in people who will change the culture of law enforcement. And people don't like to hear that, but we're going to have to change the culture. We're going to have to get away from being warriors in a community to being like my good friend Sue Rohr, who used to be the sheriff of King County, would say, being guardians of the community. But the culture is going to have to change. We can't continue with what we're doing right now, day in and day out, because think about this, and this is what I've said many times. I said, heck with what, we saw what we saw, but what I want to see is what did the report say before the officers knew that Mr. Nichols had died. And exactly what I thought, the report did not reflect what took place. So we're going to have to change the culture of law enforcement. And my good friends in law enforcement don't like to hear me say that, but we're going to change the culture. We're going to do it. And that's the message that I'm getting.
And I would agree with that. For me, coming to this work as a mother of a Black son, listening to yet another Black man be murdered and ask for his mother, that never comes out of my head. You take a minute, I took a minute, and then I realized I'm a policymaker and we have work to do. And we did some amazing work after the murder of George Floyd with police reform in our state. And we took a lot of flack. We took a lot of flack for that work because it was too much. It was overdone. It was overblown. And then you see something else. And so we were able, as Legislative Black Caucus, to meet this past weekend. We gave space to that moment. And we actually do have a statement that's out. If you we're on social media, we have a statement. And I say that because it's important. As policymakers, we have to say something. There is no moment for silence for us. These are big jobs and big roles, and we have to say something. We also have to do something. And just the week prior, one of my colleagues in the House, Representative Street, actually had a bill, police reform bill dropped that he's gotten a little bit of press over, about unnecessary stops. Literally dropped the bill, got all sorts of flack. Oh my gosh, you wanted to, and I'm not saying, it's something that I'm not sure will even come to the floor, but it was interesting. Not a week later, we saw another young man murdered in something that would have been prevented by Representative Street's bill. And so as a policymaker, we have to let that sink in. We can't ignore that. We have to say there are potential legislative solutions. And again, I'm not saying this is a bill that is absolutely perfect and this is what we need to do. But if you're not talking about it, I cried about it as a mother, but I'm talking about it as a policymaker. And that's what moments like that demand. And that's why lived experience matters. And that's why when a young man screams for his mother when he's getting murdered, you have to stop, but then you have to act.
I just have to say this too. I grew up in Louisiana, and these were some very, very difficult times in Louisiana. And I would come home night after night after a basketball game, and my grandmother would be wide awake. And it was just no big deal. And then I realized she was awake because she was so afraid of what was going to happen to me. And when my son was growing up, I was wide awake if he went out with his friends. And then my grandson, it troubled me so much. He would come over and visit us in Mill Creek, and I would say, Jared, go straight home. Grandpa, I'm going to go straight home. I would actually get in my car and drive down to their house just to make sure his car was there. What a burden you have to carry. What a burden.
Thank you. One more very important question before we have our guest journalists join us. What's the difference between the House and the Senate? Senator Lovick.
That's a great question. So, serving in the House is exactly like serving in the Senate. They're just different. It's exactly the same, just different. And if Yogi Berra were here, he would say, "Good job, John."
So what had happened was, you're told that we are co-equal branches of government, but you do have half as many members in the Senate as you in the House. So imagine building a house built for a certain number of people, built for, let's say, 20 people. And then you might have 49 in that house. And now you have 98 in the other side. And imagine just the resource constraints that I'll use my big girl words, the resource constraints that we have in the House, they don't have in the Senate. So it's a little bit, it's difficult when I go over. I always bow and curtsy when I go meet a senator because, it just feels so, and it's just, yeah. And so, I mean, we could go on and on about food, office sizes, resources, staffing, but that would take all night. We are co-equal branches of government, and when policy is put forth, it takes it passing in the House as well as the Senate, and of course being signed by the governor to make it a law. Thank goodness, because if it was based on resource allocation, the House would not have a thing. So, but it is wonderful to see that there is diversity in both people as well as work environments in our state capitol.
Okay. So with that, I would like to invite John Bauer to come up from the Everett Herald.
I'm better behind a computer keyboard than I am behind a mic. I'm the opinion page editor for the Herald. I've had that job for about 7-8 years now. Previously, I started at the Herald in 2001. And it's been part of my job. It's been my pleasure to work with both Representative Berg and Senator Lovick. I value my time because sometimes it's limited time, but I value my time being able to talk to them and get their perspective and their input on different issues that I'm writing about. So, one, thank you very much for your service. The district and the state are well served by both you and by your colleague, Representative Donaghy. So thank you.
Thank you.
April, I want to start with you first. And your background as a school board member, I want to know how that influences and informs what you're looking at, especially as the state considers issues of funding, but also other issues related to education. How do you use that in when you're drafting legislation and when you're considering legislation?
Thank you for that question. So I am a former school board director on not one, but 2 school boards. So I was on the Everett School Board as well as the Edmond School Board. I use that lens every single day. Education is our paramount duty in this state. I truly believe that not just K-12, but pre-K and high school and beyond is truly our paramount duty. We are nothing as a state without an educated populace, workforce, and constituency. So that said, it's when I look at things, everything from a finance bill to an appropriations bill, I think about how does this impact education? Because frankly, the amount of money that we spend on education is not enough, but it is so much that every time somebody comes to the well and says, well, we want this, take away this, they're talking about ed. It also is deeply personal. So a lot of the bills that I passed in my first session were education bills because of things I saw in our school. Things like that crazy 40-cent lunch copay that kids would have to pay when they were like absolutely broke. So we got rid of that. Menstrual equity, the fact that we had kids sitting through high stakes tests on their period, now no access to products or their backpack or a 25-cent quarter to get it, and literally having to sit through that. So we got rid of that. So we have all our schools now have free products for all of our students. I thank you. I just testified on a bill yesterday that was really important to me. We have high school and beyond plans for every student in our state. That's a law. Great. It's awesome. But we don't have a statewide tool like computer tool, technology. We're a tech state. We don't have a statewide tool for these plans. So we have 295 school districts and 295 different ways that our kids are doing their high school and beyond plan, the most important document that we leave them with. And some of our kids are leaving schools without that document because they don't have it. They leave and they go, oh yeah, sorry, you've been working on that since 6th grade. It's all your life dreams and hopes. You no longer have access to that. Have a great life. That's not okay. So when I think about legislation, I always use my education hat.
Yeah. Are you finding yourself now with your responsibility for finances? Are you finding yourself pulled in different directions in wanting to do things in education, but being constrained by what you have available in terms of finances?
So it's always a resource issue. I think that we have a lot of resource opportunities. I don't believe in constraints. We live in a very wealthy, well-heeled state. We have an upside down tax code. So I am in finance because of the intersection between finance and taxes and revenue and poverty. Poverty is a policy choice. We make a bad choice every day that we have this upside down tax code to choose poverty over economic stability, economic growth, and frankly, our kids. So for me, I just had to make more hours in the day to get more things done. But it is every day, education, even things like local government, housing, homelessness, our state behavioral health issues, those are all resource issues, and we have the resources. We just have to get access to them. So for me, it's all intertwined.
Thank you.
And just really quickly, so after this last question from Mr. Bauer, we'll go to audience Q&A. So if you are in the audience and have a question you would like to ask, let's get those teed up shortly.
Good. Senator, I want to go back to the issues that have come out of Memphis, but also ask a similar question about how your background influences your work. And as April mentioned, there's been quite a bit of work over the last 2 years since the murder of George Floyd in police reforms. A lot of it very successful, some of it adjusted in following years. What is it that you see needing still to be addressed, and what about Memphis is prompting you to look and say, okay, what did we not catch the first time?
Yeah. Well, so what I always like to tell people is that 99, and I believe it is about 99+% of our police officers go out there every day and they do their job well. It's the ones who don't that spoil it for all of us. There's an old saying that a police officer can do something in a second or a minute that can spoil a community for a decade. Look at how this community is going to be spoiled in Memphis. Look at how the community was spoiled after George Floyd. After George Floyd was killed, we put together a policing policy leadership team. And we consulted with some of the leading scholars throughout the country. And we came up with a series of about 13 bills to look at some reforms for law enforcement. And all of the things that we did a lot of things. The police agencies came back to us and they had a couple of concerns. One had to do with the Involuntary Treatment Act, with pursuits, with less lethal weapons, and with reasonable suspicion versus probable cause, some technical terms. We fixed all of those, and the one thing that the law enforcement community is concerned about now is pursuits. They just want us to change the pursuit policy. And I had a piece of legislation to basically go back to what they wanted. And I always tell people this, my experience, and I say this, and I say it, and I'm really serious, I probably managed more pursuits than anybody alive or dead. I was always the person there, happened to be on duty when there was a pursuit, and 99% of them turn out bad. And so one of the reasons, they just don't turn out well. And so we're going to have a program, we're going to have a model policy. We're going to have a lot of agencies come together, 19 groups will come together and create a model policy for us on pursuits. And those are the things that need to be done. Now, I have total respect for our law enforcement leaders, and they're not pleased with what we're doing, but this is what we're going to do. We have to make decisions. And as legislators, one of the things that we have to do is if you try to please everyone, and you know this, John, you please no one. And we're going to do something that's going to be, we think it's going to be better for the community, and at the same time, allow those men and women to do their job to the best of their ability.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
John Bauer from the Everett Herald.
Thank you.
Everyone. I think we have time for one audience question. So if the first person gets to the microphone gets to ask. First person to the microphone gets to ask.
So April and John know that I'm a white mother of black children, married to a black man for 32 years. And in our district, what I'm wondering is, I teared up when you were talking about a young man crying for his mom. And I fear for my 20-year-old twin boys every night when they leave. And I wish John was still the sheriff of Snohomish County. But what do you think we can do in our district? And I work here in Seattle in homelessness, and I think they're all tied together with engaging both people of color and allies in this community that we get to be blessed to be a part of, to be actively engaged in supporting policy change. Because I love protests and I love doing those things, and I think that they're necessary. But I feel like what can we do to support the policy changes that are needed to effectively change the laws? Because frankly, I'm tired of the police even pushing back on some of the things when we're calling them into impoverished neighborhoods and even dealing with some of the folks that we're struggling with.
That's a great question, and I would say what we're doing tonight is a start. I always tell people we just need to spend time talking to each other, getting to know each other. I think an opportunity like this is just great for all of us. People are not going to agree with every decision that we make, but I just want you to know that we think these decisions through. We spend a lot of time. I mentioned the policing policy leadership team that we put together. I would spend every single day in 2020 on the phone with someone or on a Zoom call, trying to come up with the best policies for our communities. So I would say, to answer your question, to start with, we just need to make sure that we all get out there and vote. Encourage people to vote. Encourage people to participate. Encourage people to write their legislators. That's the way we start the process, because where we lose is when people don't take the time to vote. I mean, I know it's tough at times to grab that ballot and sit at the kitchen table and fill it out and throw it in the mail and not even have to put a stamp on it. It's tough. It's tough sledding. And I only say that because I saw my grandmother stand in line and pay a poll tax. And that was tough sledding. So it's hard for us but we need to convince people to vote and reach out to your legislators, because, we're going to call you back. We're going to reach out and listen to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would definitely echo the voting piece of it, getting active. But I think really the other piece of it is understanding why it's important to vote. Understanding what's on the line. I've talked to so many people in this role, and they just think there are certain positions that it just doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter who your sheriff is or who the judge is or who this is. It really does matter. We can lose everything. We know that. We can lose everything in one cycle of an election. And we have lost so much. We have lost lives. We have lost liberties. We have lost freedoms because of electoral decisions. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is really understanding how policy impacts you. There are so many pieces of policy that we see in Olympia that we know have community impact, but we do need to hear from you about how it lands, because there are simply things that we don't intend to land a certain way. We need to hear feedback. And the last thing is keeping us accountable. I will frankly, I'm not gonna call you back, but I will email you back. I mean, let's be real. I get 200 emails a day, and I get probably even more phone calls. And so, but I say that because we respond and we interact and we make ourselves available to community. But you need to keep all of the folks who are on your ballot accountable in that same way. Because right now, we've got folks running rogue in every office, in every level. We've got, I could go on, but water district matters, school boards matter, city council matters, who gets appointed to your planning commissions, park boards, art design boards. You can apply for those positions. You can be at the table. We need a deep bench of committed folks in our camp. And I say our camp not as a party, but in our camp of shared prosperity, because we can't do this work alone. So thank you for that question. Thank you for being a constituent. I think one of your kids is also named Isaiah. Yeah, we both have Isaiahs. So thank you for that, because you have great name choice. But being involved, that matters. And coming to events like this, of course, matter the most.
Thank you. Representative Berg, Senator Lovick, thank you so much for being here tonight. Please, a round of applause. All right. If you are joining us online and didn't get your question answered, we will get it forwarded to our guests tonight. And if you're in the room, they're going to hang out for a little bit because we're going to take a 15-minute break. If you enjoyed our first segment, let me hear it. So you liked it. Good. Okay. Well, the second half of our session tonight, I shouldn't call it a session, but our session tonight, I have really been looking forward to this conversation ever since I figured out who we're going to be talking to tonight. You know, again, it's Black History Month, and one of the things I think we don't have enough conversations about or with are Black immigrants and refugees that are now here in the greater Seattle area. So I am so pleased and looking forward to learning so much more from our two guests here this evening. We have Emmanuel Dolo, who is the Director of Programs at the African Chamber of Commerce of Pacific Northwest, as well as Medard Ngueita, the Executive Director of World Relief of Western Washington. Welcome. And in advance, I thank you for any butchering of names and pronunciation. I know how to be humble in that way. As the first two, I want to give you guys a moment to introduce yourselves to our audience, starting.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to start by saying thank you. Most of the time when they have Black History Month, refugees are not always recognized, immigrants are not included. So to see you bring us up here in front of this beautiful audience, I think it's a really good thing to recognize, and I want to thank you for that. My name is Emmanuel G.V. Dolo. I represent the African Chamber of Commerce of the Pacific Northwest. I work for a very young guy, but he came here in 1963, and ever since he's been here. At the Chamber, we promote direct trade between companies in the United States and Africa. We also work to support, build, and strengthen small businesses, restaurants, African-owned restaurants, whatever small business they are doing, we're here to support, provide them with the resources they need to be able to live their lives and support themselves and their children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Good evening, everyone. It's very humbling and a great pleasure to be with you here tonight. And like Emmanuel said, this is an honorable moment for us to be representing refugees and immigrants who have been coming into our community. My name is Medard Ngueita. I'm originally from Chad. It's in Central Africa. If you're wondering where is Chad, it is in Central Africa, a Francophone country. And so I speak French as my first language. Still working. Bonsoir. I am really humbled to be leading a great organization that has been serving refugees and immigrants in the greater Seattle area for over 44 years now, and an organization that I have been involved with for over 11 years myself, as I was resettled by that very organization, and today having the opportunity to be leading the entire organization, and we've been expanding. And so under my leadership, now we went from being World Relief Seattle to being World Relief Western Washington, because we're taking the entire region as we provide opportunities for the communities to be welcoming refugees and immigrants. So thanks for the opportunity to be here with you tonight.
So we'll stay with you, Medard. Tell us more about World Relief mission and kind of what it is that you're doing around Western Washington.
That's a great question. World Relief is one of the 9 refugee resettlement agencies in the nation, and we are part of a bigger humanitarian organization. In Western Washington, where we have 3 offices, our vision is to see every refugee and immigrant be welcomed by community, rooted in community, and empowered for community. That means we work with refugees and immigrants who are coming into the community, and we have the humbling privilege to walk alongside them as they rebuild their lives, as they were pushed away from their homeland countries, as peace and justice have been taken away from them, as life has been stolen away from them, and we have that opportunity to be walking alongside them together with the community, of course, which I'm sure you're going to hear more about tonight, on how do we create that space where a newcomer into the community can feel welcomed, rooted, and empowered for that very community that welcomed them in the first place.
Thank you. And Emmanuel, can you tell us more about the African Chamber of Commerce's mission?
Oh, my. So the African Chamber of Commerce is like an old lady in town, and they call you to introduce her. It's like almost everybody knows her already. So the chamber has been around for 24 years, and we do 2 things. One is to promote an environment of direct trade and investment between African companies and companies in the Pacific Northwest. And the way we do it is we organize trade missions where we take companies, executives from here and take them to Africa and let them see for themselves, interact with the people over there and decide whether or not they want to invest. And we bring trade missions here to Seattle. One of our events is called the African Day Business Forum, and that's when we bring government representatives, trade delegations from Africa here to Seattle, right here at the hotel back here, and we let them network, interact with each other, learn about businesses on both sides of the aisle. The other way we promote international trade is to organize money breakfast. We'll bring small business owners together and let them discuss. And all of that is to lead the effort to bring America back to Africa in a small way. Because now when you listen to people, they talk about the 21st century belongs to Africa. So we want to do things in our own little way to be able to lead that effort. The other thing we do at the Chamber is to work with small businesses. We support them through what we call business technical support. And that is, there are a lot of small businesses, they just get in the business, but they're not really organized, they're not ready, they're not loan ready, they are not grant ready. So we help them to prepare business plans, financial planning, and all of that, business advisory, help them to locate grants and loans, and help in the application process. And a lot of other things we do. We work with the truck drivers at the Port of Seattle. And even here in the city of Seattle, we are partnering with the city of Seattle to design a project called the Truck Electrification Program. That is a very good program. It's all about clean energy. We don't want to bring pollution in the city, so they try to transition trucks from using dirty fuel to using cleaner energy. So there are a lot more things we do, and I believe as we go on, I'll be able to explain those to you. But for now, just give it back to me. Thank you.
Well, you're doing a lot, and you must be doing something right, because the City of Seattle's Human Rights Office awarded you the 2022 Human Rights Award.
I'm honored by that.
So how was that for you, and how has that sparked inspiration into the work that you're doing into 2023?
Well, the whole idea of being honored by somebody is something that I can really explain. I work because I was a refugee, and that refugee experience informed my way of thinking, my mindset. Wherever I find myself, I always try to do the best I can. And so when they give me the award, they talk about my outstanding contribution to my community. And I was like, oh, thank you, because I was not really expecting it. I didn't expect anything back, but they gave that to me. And so that has inspired me to do more. It makes me to believe that, and to also let you know that whatever you do in a small way, thinking that nobody's looking at you, there might be somebody somewhere looking at you. Somebody told me the Americans are very watchful. You see an old man, he turn his back in the corner, and then the next thing you do, he's talking about the good things you do. And you ask him, how do you know? I was just listening, I was just paying attention to you. So, yeah, that really inspired me to believe that what I'm doing is important, and I should continue doing it.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Medard, you have worked with a number of immigrant communities, including the recent Afghan refugees. Do you see any common themes in the experience of immigrants and refugees arriving to our area?
Yeah, that's really a great question. The refugees and immigrants that we work with are coming from all over the world, including Ukraine and Afghanistan, but basically from all over the world. And America is a place of its own. There are cultural differences, language barrier, weather change. There are so many things that newly arrived families have to go through. I remember when I came in 2006, coming from Chad, a place where we have sun pretty much every single day of the year. And then you find yourself in Seattle, a very rainy place where sun is a very rare thing, and everyone is looking for it. Those are part of the things that immigrants and refugees who come into this community have to face. Culturally, it is totally different. In Seattle, we talk about the Seattle freeze. People are on their own. But refugees and immigrants who are coming here are people who come from the collectivist societies. It's not an individualistic society. And so having to face where you come and you want to be friend to people, and people are like on their own, and you're unsure if someone is smiling with you or if they are trying to scare you. Those are part of the things that refugees and immigrants have to go through when they come to this place. But there is also a lot that we have to face as immigrants and refugees. Going to America is, I am heading into this place, this beautiful, place, this country where things are great. But then you get here, you have to face with something that in your country you may not have thought about. The call for social justice and racial reconciliation. Those are kind of the things that in my own country where I come from, yes, there is difference between different tribes in the country, but again, people are all alike. And then you come to America and you have to face this new notion. I heard the congressman and congresswoman earlier discussing George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. I remember when that happened, I jumped in my car. I left my family. My wife is here with us tonight. I jumped in my car, 24 hours straight drive to Minneapolis because I wanted to live that with people. I want to be part of it. And those are the things that when you have to face when you get here, you start questioning yourself. Am I really at the right place? Is there something wrong where I thought this is a place where I was running for myself, for a safety, for a place where I can feel good again, and then I get here and then I have to face this new reality. Those are part of the things that refugees and immigrants have to face when they get here. So to just give you some examples, those are some of the challenges.
No, thank you for that. And I actually want to dive into something that you just said. I think that there are people, well-intentioned, that use the words, refugee and immigrant interchangeably, thinking that they're the same thing. They're not. Can you explain to us the difference and kind of what you're seeing when you're faced with people kind of using them back and forth in that way?
Yeah, that's really another great question. Before I make that difference, let me make it clear here that we are all citizens of the world. It doesn't matter where you are or where you find yourself. Through the legal things, we get some etiquettes of status that make us different from each other. But in reality, we are all citizens of the world. Now, when it comes to refugees and immigrants, the clear difference is that a refugee is someone, according to the definition of the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees, is someone who have been persecuted in their own country and being forced out, and they cross an international border. Now, the persecution can be based on someone's just their nationality, their racial, their race, their belonging to a social group like LGBT community, for instance, or just having a different political opinion from the country that you call your country, and you get persecuted just for that. And so you have to leave. Now, those who are called refugees are those who, after leaving their own countries, have been registered by United Nations, the High Commissioner for Refugees, and they get given that status before they come to the US. Those are the refugees. An immigrant is someone who, for a variety of reasons, it could also be based on the persecution, they also left and they end up in another country. At World Relief Western Washington, like I shared earlier, our vision is to see every refugee and immigrant be welcomed by community, rooted in community, and empowered for community. And that's what we call the community to rally around and to rally behind so that we can create that space for everyone. The refugees have been vetted by the federal government before they get flown into the country. Sometimes people ask, is it safe to be around a refugee? My answer is yes. And you are going to find something great about that person called refugee that you're around, because as you do so, there happens something that we call a mutual transformative relationship that you create, where you learn more about yourself, who you really are, and what is it that you can do for someone who just looks different than you, and they also learn from you as you have that interaction with them through that mutually transformative relationship.
Emmanuel?
Well, I think I agree with him. Immigrants and refugees, we both, immigrants, for example, is basically somebody who was born out of this country. You could have been a refugee, or maybe just a businessman. You pack up your things and you come here, or maybe you could be an African immigrant. You know, an African immigrant, especially those who came here in the 30s and the 40s and the 60s, after we gained our independence, some countries started sending them abroad. They're like, okay, well, now we have our independence. We're no more under the French people or the German or whoever, so we need to build our own country. Therefore, we need manpower. We need to send people abroad to go and study. And they send them here or to England. And they go to school, and after they got in their education, they look back and like, who's going back in that heat, you know? And they come here and embed themselves within the African American kind of nomenclature, you know, and just remain here, and they don't go back. And that is why you see most of the head of states from Africa, when they come here, they don't want to see those people because there is a little tension going on over there. The guys who came here and now are immigrants or African Americans, they'll refer to the African government and say that, well, those guys, they are corrupt. You know, there's no press freedom, there's no this, they're eating all the money and this and that. And then the African leaders will say, hey, you wait a minute, we sent you here to learn and go back, and you're sitting here, so who's more corrupt? You know, so there is that tension that a lot of diplomats don't understand. Whenever somebody came around when a president came to Seattle or something like that, I would try to bring people around, we're like, oh, we're going to see that president. They were like, oh, well, that guy is corrupt. So that's the kind of immigrant. And those kind of immigrants, we want to use this platform to call on them to join us, to take America back to Africa, to invest, to make use of the skills you learn here, because our people are suffering. You know, there are no hospitals. And it has been something that has been continuing from the 50s and the 60s and 70s. They send someone here, they come here, they're not going back. And nobody's going to be over there to help them. So I just want to, I want to use this time to define that kind of group of immigrants. They were not born here, they were sent here. Nobody ran them out of their countries. They sent them here to learn. And a refugee, like my brother defined it, that's the definition. But I would like to go deeper than that, because I was a refugee myself. A refugee, people have to welcome refugees when they come to your community, because they were persecuted in their own countries. Imagine somebody who's your neighbor turn against you because you are different from him. You know, maybe you're a different tribal person and he's a different person. You didn't ask God to make you tribe A and ask God to make him tribe B, but just because you guys are, you know, not agreeing with each other, then they begin to persecute you. And that means they chase you out of your country, they do a whole lot of things to you, you know, kill people in front of you, and you run from there. And so when they come here and you open your arms to them, you give them the opportunity to rebuild their lives, you restore their dignity, you help them to understand the value of being a human being, that's a lot. And they have a lot of respect for that. They really value it. And I believe they will be counted among maybe the first class of citizens when it comes to loving this country. And so I just want to say you need to help people who are helping these refugees and immigrants to open your hearts, open your doors, and let's help them. Let's help us, because I'm a former refugee too. So thank you.
No, thank you. We'll take a couple of audience questions in just a moment, but hopefully you will understand my next question. How do you deal with the Wakanda effect? How? I think that there are people in our country now that they love Black Panther and watch those other kind of movies, that they think now they feel more in touch with African culture and, you know, all these other things. Do you come across that? How do you deal with that?
I remember going to watch Wakanda and getting to the movie theater and seeing everyone wearing, you know, African clothes and things like that. I think personally for me, Wakanda has been a great movie. A movie that proved to the rest of the world that by tradition, people always undermine and downthink about Africans. And that was an opportunity to write a story. A story where you see a movie full of stars that are Africans and who can prove to the world that there is a power in what you call Africa. Most of the time when people think about Africa, they saw the painting or they see the picture of kids, very poor and all sorts of things. Yes, we don't have the same opportunity being Africans like other people, but when an opportunity is created for us, or when someone just gets out of our way, not to create opportunity for us, someone gets out of our way and they let us go through, we always prove it that at the end of the day, we are all human beings, all equal, equally created with talent and gifted like everybody else. That's also why for me being here on the stage with many of you tonight, I don't take this opportunity lightly. The reality is that 17 years ago, I came into this country, and the organization that I have the humbling privilege to be leading today is where I learned my English. This same organization is where my first job resume was put together so I can go and get my very first job in the US. And I climbed the ladder in the corporate world to be a leader, and I decided to come back into this organization so that I can serve other people who look like me. And through it, like Wakanda, through it to be able to tell the story that while things will be tough and difficult, things are possible. And that making it an inspiration, but also an encouragement to others who are coming, but also to contribute into writing a different story of what people think about Africa as a whole, immigrants in general, Black people in particular, that we are all the same. We just need no one stepping or staying on the way, but letting us decide which box we can define for ourselves rather than someone saying that you belong to that box, that's where I want to put you. Because when that freedom is created, when no one steps on the way, then we all together as community write beautiful stories that ends up wowing everyone in the community. And that's exactly what we want to do. And that's also what the picture that Wakanda painted. And so I was so excited to watch Wakanda and seeing the things that it has changed in how we see our world.
Thank you. Well, I think everything he said is true. And I want to summarize that by saying that our strength is in our culture, our way of life, our tradition, the clothes we wear, the food we eat. And that's why here when I see a lot of people, they want to be American. You know, all the time I like to wear my African attire, and when people see me, they're, oh, I love this. Nobody ever told me, I love your coat or something. They're like, yeah. But when I wear my African, they look at me like, wow, I really love this. Oh, I love your food. Oh, I love your everything. But the thing is, we have the responsibility to make everybody to see who we are through the way we live, through the clothes we wear. Most of our girls here, they don't even tie their hair, or everything is just, you know. I'm not trying to put you down. I'm just saying that. But at least take some time to plait your hair, you know, the real African plait. And believe me, somebody's going to see you in the street like, wow. Especially those 60-year-old white ladies, they're like, wow, I love your hair. And you see them touching you and playing with you and things like that. So we all have to be ambassadors. Yeah. Well, okay, all right. But the point I'm making is that we have something very, very rich. We have to show it to the rest of the world, not just through movie, but through books, those of you who can write, through the things we do, through the food we eat. when somebody invites you to potluck, right? Potluck, where you bring your food. Don't be afraid to take your how you call it, your kala, your fufu, and your everything with you. You'll be surprised to see your colleagues eating it. You know, don't be ashamed of who you are. Our strength is in our culture, and we have to always prove to the rest of the world that we are the way you are too. And I'm so happy that most Americans, they love our culture. They love our tradition. And so that movie, even though I don't go to movie a lot, I watch it from the corner, I look at it, and wow. I've not seen somebody fly like that in the air, you know, in Africa. No. But yeah, it's a good movie.
I wish we had more time. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm sorry we're running out of time, but if you are here in the audience, we'll be hanging out afterwards. So if you have questions, they will be more than happy to answer them for you. Those of you at home, if you had questions, again, we will make sure that those questions get back to them. But please join me in, again, thanking our guests tonight for being here. Yeah. So in a few minutes, you can't leave yet. Sit down. Sit down.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. See,
This is an African forum.
That's how you. No, I love that because it means that we're having great conversation. We're becoming family in this room. So thank you, and thank you for being an example of that. So everyone, you will, in a few minutes, receive a short survey in your email. Take a minute to give us feedback on this program and idea for future programs. If you want to come down here and visit us, please do so next month, March 1st. We are going to have a great program next month centered around Women's History Month. We're going to talk about housing and how it affects women specifically in greater Seattle. So we'll have someone from the YWCA Seattle King Snohomish, as well as Mary's Place, here to talk about that. And the second half of that, we're going to talk about women trailblazers in this region as well. So again, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Have a good night.